Saudi Arabia is the largest oil-producing country in the world, but most everything the Saudis say about oil are lies. 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 Despite pumping a stupendous 3.4 billion barrels of oil a year for decades, the Saudis insist their oil reserves haven't dropped an inch. You can see this on the chart. 90% of Saudi oil comes from just 5 giant oil fields, all of which are now 41 years old or older. Obviously, these fields are now old, tired, and depleted, but the Saudis claim they're as fresh and new as they were 41 years ago. The former head of exploration and production for Aramco, the Saudi state oil company, warned the U.S. ambassador in Riyadh that the Saudi oil reserves and production capability was grotesquely overstated and not to trust Saudi promises to increase production in case needed. The meeting was supposed to be private, but WikiLeaks got its hands on the cable and revealed it. When these lies come home to roost, your purchasing power will be cut in half as gasoline rises from $8 to $10 a gallon. Food prices will soar. Clothing will soar. Medicine prices will soar. The country will be thrown into a new recession, worse than the one in 2008. When oil was in the $30 and $100 a barrel hadn't been dreamt of, the author of this special report, Saudi Oil Lies, warned that depletion of oil fields and increased consumption from Asia would drive oil to $100 a barrel. When oil hit $140 a barrel, he got his subscribers out of oil stocks and recommended positions which profit from declining prices. Readers following his advice made enormous profits on the way up, and they made enormous profits on the way down. Discover the truth. Oil is the lifeblood of the American economy, so Saudi Oil Lies will cause one of the largest transfers of wealth in the history of the country. Protect your family's life savings and your financial future. Learn how to profit from Saudi Oil Lies from the man who exposed them. Saudi Oil Lies. The Saudis brag about pumping 85 billion barrels of oil since 1987 without their reserves budging an inch. That's a load of bull. 78 billion of those barrels were pumped out of 5 Saudi oil fields, which are 40 to 67 years old. Obviously, those oil fields have much less oil in their reserves. The reason why the Saudis couldn't keep their promise to raise production is that these oil fields are now depleted. Lie number 1. Saudi Arabia claimed they could increase oil production by 2.2 million barrels a day to keep oil prices down. They failed. Saudi oil output is down 16% since last year, and oil is again near $100 a barrel. Lie number 2. The Saudis claim they pump 4.2 billion barrels of oil a year without their reserves declining. Bull. Even the former executive vice president of Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil company says that's a lie, and Saudi oil reserves are overstated by as much as 40%. Moreover, the head of the Saudi Electric Company warns the country may run out of oil as early as 2030 and advises the country to switch to solar energy. Just as the U.S. economy is starting to recover, these Saudi oil lies are going to come home to roost. Many Americans are going to be completely blindsided by a catastrophic upsurge in oil prices. Get ready now, because the coming oil shock will usher in $8 gasoline and throw millions more Americans out of work. A little-known oil company is wonderfully positioned to protect you from this situation. It has the oil the Saudis wish they had. more oil than any other investor-owned company in the world. Even though it's little known, it produces so much oil that every time oil rises a dime, their daily revenues increase by $55,000. Dear investor, the truth is that Saudi Arabian oil production is in a devastating, irreversible decline. It's already fallen from 11.53 million barrels to 9.3 million barrels of oil a day. They're cutting production because they actually have no choice. After more than half a century of continuous production, Saudi's oil fields are way past their prime and struggling to maintain even these reduced levels of production. Yet they still continue to try and lie through their teeth. Consider this. In the last 27 years, Saudi Arabia has pumped out of the ground 85 billion barrels of oil, yet claim their reserves haven't budged an inch. That's a good trick, but it's obviously impossible. Even the former executive vice president of Aramco warns bluntly that Saudi Arabia is lying about their oil. WikiLeaks recently confirmed these lies. Indeed, they made public a conversation in which a retired executive vice president of Aramco warned America not to rely on Saudi Arabia's oil claims. He said that the Saudis don't have the capacity to increase production as they claim. Moreover, he warned that the Saudis were also overstating their oil reserves by a whopping 40%. That makes sense. About 89% of Saudi oil output comes from just 5 giant oil fields, the youngest of which has been producing prodigious amounts of oil for 40 years. The oldest has been in production for 67 years. After pumping oil for 67 years, of course their reserves are depleted. Moreover, the Saudi oil fields have been damaged by decades of overproduction. Beginning around 1965, Saudi oil production began to be intentionally mismanaged by Chevron, Texaco, Mobil, and Exxon, the companies that developed Saudi Arabia's giant oil fields. The experienced oilmen running these companies were well aware of the damage such overproduction does to the structure of the reservoir. It reduces the overall volume of oil recovered, as well as the lifetime of the reservoir. But they didn't care, because they knew the Saudi king was getting ready to kick them out. So they pumped as much oil out as physically possible, while they could still get the money. After American oilmen were kicked out, Saudi bureaucrats took over. And most of them were political hacks chosen for their loyalty to the regime, not for their petroleum expertise. These bureaucrats feared the king would think they were incompetent if they didn't produce as much oil as the Americans, and they would lose their jobs. So the overproduction continued, with more damage to the reservoirs. Overproduction like this means the inevitable output decline will be that much steeper. This is the reality the Saudis face today. But they don't want the world to know about the abuse of their oil fields and the decline of their reserves, because oil in the ground serves as good collateral for loans. That's why the Saudis immediately stopped independent audits. And in all the decades since they took over the Western oil companies, they've never allowed a single independent audit. Oil production is also in a long-term decline in the world's 3 other largest oil-producing nations. In the United States, which as recently as World War II was the world's top oil producer, output peaked back in 1970. Then began a long-term decline that continued until just recently. The discovery of shale oil has stopped the decline and modestly boosted oil production in America. But after 12 years of intense drilling on America's richest shale properties, America's oil production has made back less than 20% of the previous decline. So it's still down about 3 million barrels of oil a day from peak production. Oil production is also significantly down in Russia, which swaps places with Saudi Arabia year to year for the #1 oil producer slot. There, output peaked in 1987, and since then, oil output has fallen 773,000 barrels per day. In Iran, the world's #4 oil producer, output peaked in 1974. Production there is down 2.38 million barrels per day. Indeed, if you look at oil production from all the countries in the world that allow independent audits, a remarkable picture emerges. World oil output peaked more than a decade ago and has basically been trending lower ever since. What this means is simple. We live in an era of stagnant, dwindling conventional oil supplies, and this is why oil is in a long-term bull market. At the same time, Asian demand for oil is going through the roof. According to BP's Statistical Review of World Energy, China has knocked America off its perch as the world's biggest energy consumer. That includes all forms of energy from oil to coal. Chinese oil consumption has grown in just 3 years from 8.2 million to 10.2 million barrels a day. It's expected to hit 11 million barrels per day by 2015. Right behind China comes Asia's other behemoth, India, where energy consumption is growing 5% annually. And energy consumption is roaring ahead in the other tiger economies. The Philippine GDP is growing 7% a year, and car dealerships throughout the islands are growing even faster. Thailand's economy is growing at 6% per year. This modest-sized country added 1.2 million new first-time car owners last year and is looking to do the same this year. This is important because new first-time car buyers mean lots of new permanent demand for gasoline and oil. This is not Asian, but it's significant. U.S. car sales are at a 6-year record high, which means increased consumption of gasoline in North America too. So you have an interesting combination of declining production combined with increasing demand. With Saudi oil production beginning to fall off the edge of a cliff, Bob Sachin thinks it's reasonable to expect significantly higher oil prices. 10 years ago, oil was at $21 a barrel. Today, it's around $100 a barrel, more than $70 higher. 10 years from now, oil will probably be at least another $70 higher. Almost all major oil companies will be winners. But the biggest winners will be those with the largest oil reserves and the capability of expanding production, because those will be the companies that benefit the most from the exposé of these Saudi oil lies. Here's one that perfectly fits the bill. A little-known company with more oil than any other investor-owned company in the world. This company is sitting on a mind-boggling 23 billion barrels of recoverable oil. This company actually has more oil than the entire reserves of Brazil, 15.3 billion barrels, or Mexico, 11.4 billion barrels combined. By itself, it has more oil than China, and more oil than all the countries in Western Europe combined. The street value of this company's 23 billion barrels of oil is approximately $2 trillion. The company currently produces more than 550,000 barrels of oil a day. So every time the price of oil rises one thin dime, This company makes another $55,000 a day, every day. That comes to $18.9 million a year. A $10 rise in the price of oil will increase this company's revenues by about $1.9 billion a year. And almost all of that will flow right to their bottom line. With leverage like that, its shares are almost certain to rise sharply on a modest rise in oil prices and explode up on a large rise. You get more than 4 times as much oil for your investment dollar than with Chevron or Exxon. When you buy stock in Chevron Texaco, you're effectively getting proven oil reserves for $33.58 per barrel. When you buy shares in ExxonMobil, you get oil for $30.76. With Royal Dutch Shell, the number is $15.86. By contrast, when you buy shares in this undervalued Godzilla of the oil market, you're getting oil in the ground for just $6.51 a barrel. So shares could quadruple and still remain undervalued relative to its peers in the industry. That alone makes it one of the greatest long-term growth companies in the oil industry. And with its 23 billion barrels of oil in the ground, this company is the crown jewel of the oil patch in an era of aging supergiant oil fields. If you're interested in investing in this undervalued Godzilla of the oil market, subscribe to Bob Sachin's Oil and Energy Investment Report and get this research report free as a bonus. Bob's Oil and Energy Report focuses on ferreting out big profits in hot oil and energy investments. Every month, Bob's Oil and Energy Investment Report covers high-tech energy stocks. Valero Energy is a great example. They are one of the few refiners with the technology to take sulfur-laden low-grade crude oil and turn it into the environmentally friendly fuels mandated by law. It returned 458% profits to Bob's subscribers in just 3.5 years. Subscribers also bagged as much as 223% profits in a second smaller oil refiner, Frontier Oil, with similar technology. And they bagged up to 139%, 168%, and 148% in still 3 other high-tech energy stocks. Undervalued oil reserves. When Bob saw that Texas-based Triton Energy's oil reserves were clearly undervalued by industry standards, he told subscribers to buy. The subscribers, following his advice, bought at $11.50 a share and out at $39.50 2 years later. 243% profits. Simple cherry picking. Bob also recommended Encana and Penn West, 2 little heralded companies with huge natural gas reserves. His subscribers tripled their money, up to 246% and 239% profits respectively. This little-known company with more oil than any other investor-owned company in the world epitomizes undervalued oil reserves, and Bob expects it to return profits to investors, like Triton, 243%, Encana, 246%, and Penn West, 239%. High dividend yields. If you're tired of getting a paltry 1% to 2% on your money market funds or CDs, you'll love the high dividend paying oil and energy shares Bob recommends. Yields more like 6% to 10%, and often largely tax-free. Scavenger oil companies can also offer extremely attractive yields. One of Bob's favorites specializes in buying up old played-out oil fields that aren't lucrative enough for the majors to bother with anymore, and makes them profitable again. This company is so good at what they do, they're one of the few oil producers that have been able to steadily increase their reserves and production. Indeed, they've increased reserves in 16 of the last 18 years and increased production in 15 of them. As a result, they're making money hand over fist. And when oil was down at around $35 a barrel in 2009, they picked up a number of oil fields on the cheap. Now, with oil back around $100, these look like big winners. Bob's previous scavenger oil company Recos piled up profits for his subscribers as high as 115%, 133%, and 154%. If profits like these speak to you, subscribe now to Bob Sessions' Oil and Energy Investment Report for a limited time only, half price. Bob has sold tens of thousands of subscriptions for full price $144 each. But now, as part of Bob's 15th anniversary sale, if you're one of the next 2,000 to subscribe, you can get an annual subscription for half price, saving $72. And you get 2 red-hot research reports, which normally cost $49 each, free as bonuses. You pay just half price, $72, and your total savings come to $49 plus $49 plus $72, equaling $170. Bonus report number 1. Saudi Oil Lies: How to get ready for and prosper from the coming oil shock. Bonus report number 2. Little-known company with more oil than any other investor-owned company in the world. When you buy shares in this company, you get oil for about $6.51 per barrel. Shares could quadruple and still remain undervalued relative to its peers in the industry. Either of these research reports are available for $49 each, but you get both of them for free when you subscribe. In addition to the research reports and new recommendations, Bob provides frequent updates, specific take-profit instructions, and around-the-clock support from our subscriber service center. Bob's guarantee to you: if for any reason during the first 90 days you are not pleased with your subscription, he will refund your subscription fee. 3 months is plenty of time to get a feel for oil and energy, so if for any reason during the first 90 days you are not pleased with your subscription, he will refund your entire subscription fee. The bonus reports are yours to keep. One last thought. Bob just released another research report about safe, conservative oil companies paying 6 to 10% dividends. Subscribe for 2 years, just half price at $144, and get this report, normally sold at $49, as an additional third free bonus. One last point. The clock is ticking on Saudi Arabia's oil lies. The truth is starting to leak out, and when the market finally realizes that the vast amounts of oil Saudi Arabia claims it can produce is a fantasy, that the vast reserves of oil it claims to have in the ground are wildly exaggerated, it's going to turn the oil market upside down and send oil prices rocketing up. Most Americans are going to be blindsided by a catastrophic upsurge in oil that pushes gasoline to $8 a gallon. Millions more are going to be thrown out of work, but it's also going to be a bonanza for investors in the right oil stocks. So don't let another day go by without taking action. Respond early and get an extra bonus report. $23 million oil company with a property bigger than Delaware and Rhode Island combined. In the heart of Africa's richest, hottest oil exploration zone. Good only for the first 1,000 to respond.